Well, this is it. With the Pokédex complete, there's only one challenge left before us. If you've watched the playthrough all the way up to this point, thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been entertaining, and I hope I can give you a thrilling finale here. If it felt at all like the rest of the game wasn't really giving me much of a challenge, then the Elite Four are going to be a huge step up from that. Sure, you have 4 trainers, which are basically 4 additional gym leaders. They all specialize in a specific kind of Pokemon, but you have to face all of them without healing or taking a break at all. So the items you have going into this challenge are all the items you're going to have, and you need 6 powerful Pokemon that can deal with any kind of opponent. So if you've been cruising through the game with just your starter and maybe one other Pokemon, you're going to need to switch up your strategy big time in order to deal with these guys. First up is Lorelei, trainer of Ice-type Pokemon. Ice-types were difficult to deal with back in Generation 1 because 3 out of the 5 Ice-types in the game also had Water as a secondary type, so you couldn't hit them with Fire for super effective damage because the Water was going to cancel that out. Not only that, most of the types that can hit Ice and Water for super effective damage are also weak to Ice-type itself. So the best way to fight Lorelei is to use an electric type, which is why Red has obtained an Electrode from the power plant. Electrode also happens to be the fastest Pokemon in the game, bar none. So as you have seen, the strategy of using Thunder Wave to paralyze the enemy and then using Thunderbolt to take them down is working very effectively. This Electrode also has Light Screen, a move that reduces damage from special attacks. However, unlike every other generation besides this one, Light Screen in Generation 1 stops working if you switch to another Pokemon, so not quite as effective as in the later games. Still, Electrode is very effective at dealing with most of Lorelei's team. You gotta be careful around Cloyster because it's got some physical attacks as well. And if things ever seem hopeless for Electrode, there's always Explosion, which, like Self-Destruct, will KO Electrode but do a lot of physical damage, and being the fastest Pokemon in the game also means you have the highest crit chance in the game, so there's that advantage as well. Also, Lorelei has a Slowbro, which is not an Ice type. However, there really weren't enough Ice types to fill an entire team unless you do something weird like give Lorelei Articuno, which is supposed to be a one-of-a-kind Pokemon that the player can capture, so she's not exactly allowed to have that. Also, I gotta say, the AI glitch that I've been talking about is very prevalent in the Elite Four battles. For Slowbro, if you send out a Poison type, all it can do is use the stat-boosting Amnesia. My Vileplume is completely safe here. Lorelei's Dewgong is also vulnerable to the same problem. It has the move Rest, which counts as a Psychic-type move, so against Poison types it's only going to use Rest. However, in Yellow version, what I think it's interesting to note is they seem to have actually coded in an exception to the usual rule. Because when I send out Gengar against Dewgong, it randomly uses one of its other moves instead of Rest. The reason they did this is because they were made aware of a particularly egregious soft lock that can occur here. The way that works is that if you sent in a fighting type and used the move Rage, then you would be permanently locked into Rage, and then if you could not do enough damage to defeat Dewgong before it uses Rest to heal it all off, then you'd just be stuck forever. You can't do anything but Rage, and you can't defeat the Dewgong because it's constantly healing off the little damage that you do to it. Anyway, you saw that Yellow has a Gengar now. Gengar is pretty versatile and can learn Thunderbolt from a TM, so that's who Yellow is using. And as for Green, Green is going to give us one last glitch demonstration. You might think that the Toxic Leech Seed glitch doesn't exactly work against a Pokemon with Rest, because Rest cures the poison. However, if you cure the poison after being hit with Toxic, the Toxic counter continues to go up, and therefore Leech Seed will continue to increase its damage. Never change Generation 1. That's unfortunately going to be the last we'll see of Green for this playthrough because I really couldn't think of anything else to do with the Elite Four that involved like some weird glitch or quirk in the battle system. Besides the AI problems, of course, we're just getting started with those. That Dewgong is really the only Pokemon they had randomly use a move other than Rest, if you trigger the AI glitch against it. Oh, and speaking of which, many of the Elite Four's Pokemon were actually altered in Yellow version to make them less vulnerable to this AI problem. This Slowbro, for example, it now has Psychic in addition to Amnesia, so if you do send out a Poison type against it, it will have a 50-50 chance of using either Amnesia or Psychic, which can still be pretty dangerous, mind you. Anyways, you can see that Gengar is doing an amazing job here. Almost too good, in fact. I kinda started to think that maybe bringing in Gengar had ruined the challenge, but too late for that now. Lorelei next sends out Jynx, an Ice Psychic Pokemon. It doesn't have a Water type, so Charizard can take it down very easily. I don't even think this Jinx has a Psychic type move, oddly enough. Definitely has an Ice type move. Naturally, Lorelei has saved her best Pokemon for last. Lapras is the strongest Ice type in the game and a pretty powerful Pokemon overall. High HP and defenses, access to a lot of great moves including Ice Beam, which will freeze you at least once if you're unlucky. Luckily for Red, Lapras does not have Rest, so the strategy there was to hit it with Toxic and then wait for the poison to do its job. One move that it does have, however, is Confuse Ray, a Ghost-type move, which means that if you send out a Ghost against Lapras, it will do nothing but use Confuse Ray even after you are already confused. How fantastic. Gengar has also learned Dream Eater at this time. We'll see what that move is all about later. Now switching over to Blue, if all of this AI abuse doesn't really sit well with you, there is a much easier and possibly cheaper strategy you could use against any of the Elite Four, and pretty much the entire game as a matter of fact. So, you know how we picked up that TM from Giovanni that teaches a one-hit kill move? Remember what I mentioned the weakness of that move was? Low accuracy? Well, if you use an X accuracy, all of your moves never miss, including the one-hit kill moves. So, if you use an X accuracy, it is simply a matter of not being slower than the enemy, because in Generation 1, the one-hit kill moves require you to be faster than your enemy in order to use them. So that's a little bit strange, but Dugtrio is very, very fast, so I've taught it Fissure, and by using an X accuracy and maybe an X speed as well if you need it, you can basically sweep entire enemy teams with just your one-hit kill moves. It also turns out that you can do this way earlier in the game if you want, because you can purchase a TM for Horndrill, which is a normal type version of Fissure, so it'll work on the flying types as well. Of course, that would have made the game far less interesting, so I chose not to play the game that way. I mean, the Blue version playthrough has been all about optimizing my moves to the best that I can, but there's a limit to that if it just makes the game even more boring than it already is when you use the kind of strategies that the Blue playthrough has been using. Also, I love this line from Lorelei. "How dare you," she says in response to the cheapest strategy of all time. How dare you indeed. The only weakness to that strategy, if you can even call it that, is that Fissure only has 5 power points, so you can only use it 5 times before you have to visit a Pokemon Center, unless you've stocked up on the Ethers and Elixirs found throughout the game. I've saved them all up for this. Come to think of it, power points in general are going to be a problem when facing the Elite Four with only 2 good Pokemon, so saving up all of your Elixirs for this point is a good strategy if you are going this path. The second member of the Elite Four is Bruno. Back when I first played this game, I thought Bruno had some relation to Brock because their faces are similar and they both use Onix on their teams. However, his design changed in the later generations, so yeah, there's basically no relation between him and Brock. Would have been interesting though, you don't really get a lot of backstory on the Elite Four before fighting them. They're only seen in their respective chambers, and only one of them really has anything to say about any other character in the game. Anyways, as I'm sure you have concluded by now, this fight is, not much to talk about. Bruno is unfortunately considered the weakest of the Elite Four. I don't think there's any way anybody could lose this fight. The 2 Onix are double weak to grass and water, and they're really only there in the first place because there aren't enough good fighting types to fill out an entire team. And then you have the general weaknesses of fighting types in general. Very weak to Psychic, which is a strong move that the player is definitely going to have by this point in most cases, and they can be completely shut down by a Ghost, because fighting types cannot hit Ghosts, and the only fighting type here with an elemental move is Hitmonchan, and you know why that isn't much to talk about. I've already mentioned that Hitmonchan's special stat is too low for special attacks to be viable for him. You might have also noticed that Hitmonlee has High Jump Kick, a move that is very powerful, but if it misses, it will do damage to the user. Not a lot of damage it seems, way less than I remember, but it does damage to him nonetheless. Either way, Yellow is basically going to deal with this by sweeping the team with Gengar, poison them, confuse them, all sorts of tactics to get them to hurt themselves rather than hurt us. As for Red, after using Vileplume to Petal Dance the Onix, Red sent out Dragonite. Dragonite is the final evolved form of Dratini and Dragonair. I was a little concerned about using him because I had to rare candy him to level 55, because that's the level Dragonair becomes Dragonite. You really have to crank out a lot of levels to get a Dragonite. But Dragonite is a pretty good Pokemon for the Elite Four, I would say. You can resist all of the fighting type attacks, and you've also got Dragon Rage, which does a fixed 40 damage. Remember that, that's going to be important later. Dragonite is actually the highest leveled Pokemon that Red has on her team right now, which, I guess might be a little tainty, I want to say, because I did use rare candies to get Dragonite all the way to level 55, but I don't really consider it too tainty because if you use rare candies to get somebody to high level rather than train them yourselves, you miss out on some extra stat points, which is not a whole lot at this level to be honest, but still. There's a difference between a Pokemon raised with rare candies and when you raised yourself. And it's not like I got Dragonite to like level 100 or something. I could have done that real easy, but then it wouldn't be as fun. Remember, I'm thinking of the viewer, so try not to be too angry with me. Ah yes, and here we have the first use of the Hypnosis Dream Eater strategy. A Dream Eater is a psychic type move, which means it's going to do a lot of damage to Machamp, and it even drains health, but it only works if the enemy Pokemon is asleep, which is very easy to do with Hypnosis. Hypnosis has some shaky accuracy though, so maybe an X accuracy is warranted if you try to use this strategy. Then again, that is kind of cheap. We already saw why X accuracy is broken. Ah well, do whatever you want. The third member of the Elite Four is Agatha. Agatha is an old lady who seems to have a past history with Professor Oak, which makes her the only member of the Elite Four to have any sort of established backstory. All 2 sentences of it, but no matter. So, her arena seems to have a lot of gravestones, which is not something I want to think about too much, to be completely honest, but it does seem to suggest that she is the ghost trainer of the Elite Four, which is, there's not really enough ghost types for her to have an entire team of them, so she's been given a couple of poison types as well. But then again, she could just as easily be the poison type Elite Four, but then again, we already had a poison type gym leader, and I'm gonna stop thinking about this. This ought to be interesting though. Yellow's Gengar is only level 38, and we're up against a level 56 Gengar, and there's gonna be another one with a way higher level than that as well. Agatha's Gengar favor the Hypnosis Dream Eater strategy, and they've also got Confuse Ray. All of which they can use because these are all moves that count as being super effective towards ghost types. Unfortunately, the enemy has a tendency to use Dream Eater when you're not asleep, and you can also recover from sleep simply by using the Poke Flute, so it's only a matter of waiting until the Hypnosis decides to miss, then you don't have to waste a turn on the Poke Flute. I feel like I should insert the surprised Pikachu face meme though, because Agatha is one of the only trainers in the entire game, barring the jugglers in Koga's gym, to actually switch her Pokemon out, which she just used to Soul Read my Charizard and switch to Golbat when I was about to use Dig. Yes, Red has taught Charizard Dig, it's a very good move for him. Charizard's got a lot of attack power, Dig is still really powerful. There is a TM for Earthquake, I don't think Charizard can learn that. But yeah, some kind of ground-type move basically has Agatha's entire team swept, and if Golbat shows up, you just hit it with Flamethrower or something, I guess. Golbat is still a really weak Pokemon, there's really nothing you can do with it. Also, for some reason, Agatha's team includes a Haunter that she just decided to not fully evolve for some reason. I don't really know what's up with that. As for Blue, yeah, there's really not going to be anything interesting here. I've been using Dugtrio and Digging throughout the entire game, so of course that's what I'm going to do here. This is just, it's really embarrassing for the old lady, I gotta say, being swept by a guy with only 2 Pokemon on his team. Well, I should say 2 well-trained Pokemon. Blue has backups on his team, but still, not a good day for Agatha. Really not a whole lot else to say other than this was the fight that gave Dugtrio enough levels to learn Earthquake, which in Generation 1 has the same amount of power as Dig, but with Dig you take 2 turns to use the move, with Earthquake you just take 1 move. But then again, you do get that 1 turn of invincibility with Dig, so maybe overriding Dig with Earthquake is not a good idea, but we'll see how that plays out. So I've probably given the impression that this fight is not much to talk about. And normally that would be true, however, whenever I play Generation 1, something new or weird that I've never seen before happens, and that's what happened in this fight. So over in Yellow version, I put Arbok to sleep and then Agatha switched him out because the computer is allowed to do that. They're allowed to switch out after the opponent has taken their move, whereas normally switching would happen before your move. So what happened then was Gengar put me to sleep, and naturally I played the Poke Flute to cure it, and after knocking out Gengar, obviously Agatha is going to send out Arbok again, so when that happened, I found out something amazing. So look at this. So the Arbok is going to come out, and what's interesting is, Arbok is no longer asleep. Now that doesn't look like much, sure, but you have to remember that it was asleep when it was switched out, so it should come back in asleep, right? So what happened? When I used the Poke Flute, it not only woke up both of the active Pokemon, but also all Pokemon that were waiting in reserve. I did not know that the Poke Flute could do that. Like, I literally just found this out. This is not documented everywhere. I know when you use the flute, it says all sleeping Pokemon wake up, but seriously, I didn't think it would affect the Pokemon that were still waiting inside of their Pokeballs. How could they hear the flute? Do they hear it through the Pokeball? I guess the Poke Flute is supposed to be like this sound that only they can hear. It's like a dog whistle, so maybe that makes sense. But seriously. Oh, and that's not even the end of it, because you know what happened when I was having Blastoise use Dig here? The Arbok paralyzed me with Glare. Now, Blastoise knew Dig, so I was trying to use Dig on Arbok. But then I lost the second turn of Dig to the paralysis. And you know what happened? It triggered an invincibility glitch. I'm not kidding. This is something that can happen with Dig in Generation 1. If you lose the second turn of Dig to paralysis or confusion, the game thinks you are permanently in Dig status. So you're still under the ground. You can't get hit by anything that isn't Earthquake or Fissure. This is so amazing. I've never had this glitch happen before, and it happened at the tail end of the Agatha fight. Isn't that amazing? And this can happen with Fly as well. Fly is another 2-turn move that puts you in a semi-invulnerable state. However, in Generation 1, there are no moves that can hit you while you're flying, so if this triggers off of Fly, you're permanently invincible until you use Fly again or switch out, which you would never want to do. You can even cure the paralysis if you want. Amazing! That just leaves the final member of the Elite Four. Lance, you poor fool. Alright, so Lance is a dragon trainer. I think his name is a reference to the Dragonlance novels. And, let me put it this way. You know that AI glitch I've been going on and on about? It was first discovered against Lance. In Red and Blue versions, Lance is a really awful trainer. He's just not a tough fight at all. Dragons in Generation 1, first of all, there's only one line of dragons in Generation 1. Dratini, Dragonair, and Dragonite. So they needed to throw in some additional Pokemon to fill out his team, and they gave him dragon-like Pokemon, like Gyarados, who is, for some reason, not a dragon, even though his entire concept is based on a fish turning into a dragon. The dragon type is weak against two things: Ice and Dragon itself. However, there is only one Dragon-type move in the game, and that's Dragon Rage, which does a fixed amount of damage, so one thing I wanted to try here was sending in an actual Dragon against Gyarados, thinking that it would be forced into using Dragon Rage every time. And I was right. Much easier to plan around this guy if you know he's only going to do 40 damage every turn. Also, Dragonite loves its physical moves. It has a lot of physical attack power. Now, as for Ice, dragons are double weak to Ice, so Ice Beam basically one-shots most of Lance's team, no matter who they are. Once you're past the Gyarados, this is really, really easy. Even accounting for the fact that I'm not using a Poison type, and therefore am not triggering the Agility glitch, it's very easy to just one-shot these guys with Ice Beam. A lot of Pokemon can learn it, and you might have captured Articuno, who also has it at base and can learn Blizzard one level later. I just don't get this. Why would you hype this guy up as the leader of the Elite Four who trains indestructible dragons when one Ice Beam is all it takes to knock down most of these guys? Of course, dragons would go on to be much, much better in later generations, especially in Generation 4 where they are just monsters in the competitive scene. But yeah, here in Generation 1, not so much, although Dragonite is used competitively for a couple of reasons. I do want to mention, however, that Lance's team was given an overhaul in Yellow version to make them not vulnerable to the Agility glitch, so they have actual elemental attack moves. There's kind of a problem with that too. See, The Dragonairs and Dragonite were given a wide variety of special attacks, but Dragonite's special stat is kinda not there. It's much more of a physical attacker, so I'm sure that they have Hyper Beam, but if you take Gengar against these guys, then Hyper Beam's not going to be an issue because it'll go right through you. And Gengar's special stat is pretty high itself, as well as its speed, and I'm using an X accuracy to make Hypnosis always land. Yeah, still kinda not there. Also, you might be wondering why I keep using Gengar's Thunderbolt instead of Pikachu's Thunderbolt, cause the main character of the game, quote-unquote, should probably participate in the battles. Honestly, Pikachu has kind of fallen off. Gengar is much, much faster than him at this point. I mean, Pikachu's not allowed to evolve, so that's kind of a problem. Yeah, in hindsight, I guess I could have leveled him up some more, but I guess there's nothing we can really do about that now. Here, let's look at something else instead. How about another clip of the agility glitch in action? Or should I say the barrier glitch, because Dragonite also has barrier. And that's a little bit interesting to talk about because Dragonite is not supposed to learn barrier at any point in Generation 1. Lance is actually cheating here and using an illegal moveset. And you know something? That actually seems to be a running theme with Lance, because in Generation 2 he's got Dragonites that are below level 55, which is when they're supposed to evolve to Dragonite, so how could you have a Dragonite that's less than level 55? In fact, I'm almost certain that Lance has some kind of illegal moveset in the Stadium games as well, but I haven't fought Lance in those games in forever, so I don't know for sure. I may have also neglected to show that Lance has an Aerodactyl on his team. I don't know why he does. Dinosaurs are not dragons. We really need to stop making that mistake. But whatever. Aerodactyl goes down in one Ice Beam and gives Articuno the experience necessary to learn Blizzard at level 51. Ah yes, Blizzard, the move that in Generation 1 has 90 accuracy instead of 70, like its counterpart moves Thunder and Fire Blast. Down goes Dragonite in one hit. From a Blizzard? Oh, I get what they're saying. Aerodactyl is weak to blizzards, and ice killed the dinosaurs. That's why it's on Lance's team, and his entire team is weak to ice. No, that's terrible. That's really a stretch. Never mind what I just said. With Lance defeated, there is only one trainer left, the champion of the entire region. And it's none other than the rival himself. Yes, the rival character who has been a pest this entire game has actually gotten to the rank of champion before you did, which back then this was a really, really big surprise, and probably one of the most memorable moments of the game, considering that the final boss music is still used in tournaments. And while everyone knows about this twist, considering the game is 25 years old at this point, like with the Giovanni reveal, I've gotta hand it to Generation 1 for actually doing something like this, because, you know, it's just something you don't expect out of the games anymore, because it's already been done once. Why would the rival ever be the final boss ever again, and know that post-credits match at the end of Omega Ruby doesn't really count? So here we go, the final battle of the game, and it starts off with a level 61 Pidgeot. It's probably going to go down in one Blizzard, but I missed, so I'm going to try Blizzard again. I wonder if Pidgeot had used Mirror Move there, would it be able to Blizzard me? That would have been unpleasant. Unfortunately, Pidgeot is still not really champion material, so it goes down in one shot. I mean, he might have some really powerful Pokemon, but I've got the legendary Bird of Ice, and hello, Alakazam. Alakazam is still a very challenging opponent, but what I didn't know at the time of recording this is that if I'd sent out a Psychic type of my own, this Alakazam would actually suffer a different variety of AI glitch. Of course, I'm going to freeze him in this playthrough, but if you send out a Psychic type against Alakazam, it cannot use any of its own Psychic attacks because that would be a not very effective move, and the computer tries to avoid not very effective if it can. So it would be stuck using Recover over and over again, and if you can damage it more than it can recover, then you're gonna take him down without even a scratch on you. So keep that in mind if you decide to play this. I then sent out Dragonite thinking I could do the same trick with Gyarados that I did with Lance's Gyarados, but the rival actually doesn't have a Gyarados in the red playthrough, so this wound up being a bit of a mistake, but it's no big deal. Rhydon doesn't even have any rock moves in red and blue version, so it doesn't really matter too much. Moving over to Yellow version, you can see that Alakazam was much tougher for Yellow than it was for Red. Yellow doesn't have any Psychic Pokemon to take advantage of the AI glitch, and without any Pokemon to just outright freeze Alakazam easily, it was a much more uphill battle. I guess I'm regretting that decision to not use Mr. Mime in Yellow version, huh? In Yellow version, the rival starts with a Sandslash. He went down so easily I didn't feel like talking about him. AI glitch again. Exeggutor is worth a good amount of words though. This Pokemon does not make any sense to me at all. It doesn't have any damaging grass or psychic moves. It has Hypnosis, Stomp, Barrage, and Leech Seed. Now, this makes Exeggutor very interesting when it comes to the AI glitch. The best way to deal with it is to send in a water type because it will constantly try to Leech Seed. If you send in a ghost poison type like Gengar, however, something weird happens. It uses Hypnosis, and then if you do not cure the sleep right away with the Poke Flute, it will actually try to use its normal type moves, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't even go for Leech Seed. I don't really get it. Now, Blue, on the other hand, Blue had to deal with a lot of trouble concerning Gyarados and Venusaur. Gyarados is actually very difficult to deal with if you do not have an electric type, and Blue went this entire game without getting an electric type, so it was down to Ice Beams in order to take down Gyarados. But eventually that did happen, with some assistance from some X items at the end. Mainly X Speed, and also X Special to resist special attacks a little better. In Red and Blue versions, the final 3 Pokemon for the rival will be Gyarados, Arcanine, and then Exeggutor, with one of those 3 being replaced by the starter of the same type. And if you have to deal with Exeggutor, you can rest easy knowing that it does not know Leech Seed and in fact only has 3 moves in total. In this specific scenario, Arcanine can be a little bit difficult to deal with without taking any damage. Arcanine is very fast and has a lot of physical attack power, but it will frequently KO itself for you, just like Blaine's did. That only leaves whatever starter he picked, which is probably going to be the toughest opponent in the entire game. It's got the highest level, and by now you know all of the strengths of the 3 starters, how bulky they are, how powerful they can get, the kind of moves they have access to, and Venusaur was just... well, I've only got 2 Pokemon that are weak against it, right? So this might be just a tad difficult. I'm hoping that Venusaur goes for Solar Beam, which is a 2-turn move. You have to charge on the first turn, and then you unleash it on the second turn. So if I had kept Dig, at least I would have been able to dig when I see the first turn of Solar Beam. But there are 2 other moves it can use too. The High Crit Razor Leaf, and the Draining Mega Drain. You definitely don't want any damage that you dealt to be undone with Mega Drain, so you have to get a one-shot kill as soon as possible. Dugtrio is pretty fast, but you have to set up an X accuracy if you want to use Fissure, and Earthquake is not going to be enough, so I had to get very lucky in order to pull off that win with Blue, but I did pull it off. In Yellow version, the final 3 Pokemon you'll be dealing with are Ninetales, Cloyster, and Magneton, with one of those 3 being replaced by whatever Eevee form the rival decided to take. If you were able to defeat Lorelei's Cloyster, you should have no problem with the rival's Cloyster, and Ninetales has Confuse Ray, so you can use the same AI glitch again. Send in your Ghost, and it'll only be able to use Confuse Ray. Just be careful, though, you don't want to hit yourself too many times and knock yourself out that way. That would be very embarrassing. Ninetales also seems to have a lot of special. It's not taking that much damage from Dream Eater, but then again, Ninetales is like over level 60, so the level difference is becoming very apparent at this point. As for the final match with Jolteon, this might be a little bit boring, but I decided to use Hypnosis with an X accuracy, so putting it to sleep and then finishing it off that way was really not that difficult or interesting at all, unfortunately. Jolteon has swapped out Thunderbolt for Thunder, which has low accuracy, so you might dodge the first hit or you might not. I think Gengar could take a Thunder either way. Well, that was not exactly the most thrilling way to end the Yellow version playthrough. I guess that's a consequence of using a very powerful Pokemon, but with that, Yellow version is completed, Blue version is completed, and that only leaves Red version. And Red has taken down Exeggutor. That couldn't have been difficult at all. So that means it's now time for the matchup you have all been waiting for. Starter versus Starter, Charizard versus Blastoise, and oh my goodness, level 65 is actually way higher than I was expecting. I go for a Dig, that isn't going to do much, and Blastoise actually has Blizzard. I don't know why it went for Blizzard, it should have gone for Hydro Pump, but oh well. That's actually really strange. By the rules of the AI glitch, it should have gone for Hydro Pump, But no matter, that just means I have to use a type that is actually super effective against it. So Electrode goes in, uses a Thunder Wave, and then I can just use Thunderbolt. And I'm gonna use Light Screen here just for safety. Most of Blastoise's attacks are special, so Light Screen will reduce the damage there, probably not by enough. Electrode does not have very good defenses at all. Okay, maybe that wasn't the most exciting way to end the battle either, but with that, Red is now the champion and has a completed Pokédex. She has won everything. Now all that's left is to watch the ending to this glorious game. As we can see, Blue is very frustrated that he became the champion of the Kanto region for all of 5 seconds. But he ought to be proud, really, because he made it there first, somehow. Somehow he got through Victory Road much faster than we did. But then again, Red captured all the Pokemon, so maybe she was busy with Moltres or something, I don't know. And then Professor Oak shows up to congratulate us. Apparently he came when he heard that his grandson became champion. Yeah, he came alright. What is it with you guys? Why do you hear one simple 4-letter word and then start thinking dirty thoughts? I came when I heard. Never mind. And then he says something that I don't get. He says his grandson lost because he didn't treat his Pokemon with care. I don't know about you, but I took way underleveled Pokemon into the final battle and made my Electrode explode over and over again. I don't know if he's the one who doesn't treat his Pokemon with care. Anyway, the professor invites us to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. However, Red has some unfinished business to attend to before that. See, when you beat the game, you're returned to Pallet Town and you can basically do whatever you want. You can go places, capture more Pokemon if you want. I think Red has basically seen all there is to see, however. You can see that she has 150 Pokemon seen and owned. There's nothing left to capture in this iconic Pokédex. Or is there? You see, there's one slot that's missing, and it's the one Pokemon that we've heard about, but we've never seen in the flesh. So, if you go back to Cerulean City and surf down this, what is it, a river or something, you will see this cave. It's actually been there the entire game, but if you come here before becoming champion, it will be blocked by a guy who tells you that it's very dangerous inside, and only the champion should be allowed in, and he is right on the nose. This is known as the Unknown Dungeon, which is kind of a paradox. In the later games, they change it to the Cerulean Cave, just so they don't confuse it with the actual Pokemon called Unknown. Anyways, this dungeon is weird in that it's actually different between the 3 iterations of Generation 1. There's the Japanese red and green version of the cave, and then there's the Japanese blue version of the cave, which is used in the international versions, and then there is the yellow version of the cave. When the cave returned in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they based it off the yellow version of the cave, which is very interesting. And in Fire Red and Leaf Green, they used the Japanese red and green version of the cave. And I never played Let's Go, but I presume it would use the yellow version of the cave. I'm actually not sure why they decided to revise this post-game dungeon that many times. Either they thought the original version was too linear, or they wanted to put better items to find, because in yellow version there are actually some really rare items. Regardless, this cave does live up to its hype. It's got some incredibly powerful Pokemon. I got an encounter with a level 64 Raichu one time, and that's really weird because Raichu is something you need a stone to evolve to, so if there was a Thunderstone in here, that would actually be really attentive to detail, but I don't know. There are also Chansey in here in case you want to catch them that way instead of the Safari Zone. The Pokemon are so powerful that you actually can't repel them if your own Pokemon are too weak. A repel is not going to be enough if you've got like a level 50 Charizard, which is basically what Red has for this part of the game. So I've actually edited out all of the encounters because there's nothing to see. I just run away from them. But they actually do have a fair shot at wearing you down because they're so strong you might not be able to run away that easily. Unless you've got Pokédolls. So maybe bring some? Also, another thing I wanted to point out is that the cave uses the Team Rocket HQ theme for its music. I don't know if they're trying to allude to Team Rocket again in this area. I don't think they are. I think my theory about music being used as an illusion is not really holding that much water anymore. At least not as much water as this cave area, because there's a lot of water in here. You're gonna need to surf. No strength puzzles, oddly enough, though. So what exactly are we doing down here anyways? What's the point of this cave? Well, of course, there's one Pokemon left to capture. It's the final one-of-a-kind legendary, and it's sitting right in front of us. This is the most powerful Pokemon in the game, and everybody saves their Master Ball for it, so you want to know what I say? You want to know what I say? I say, I don't need no stinking Master Ball, I'm doing this the usual way, the traditional way. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce the legendary Mewtwo, the genetically engineered clone of Mew, the most powerful Pokemon in existence. Like, they nerfed Mewtwo in the later generations, but in Generation 1, nothing stops Mewtwo. It's got Swift for some reason, which is not a good move for it, but it's a powerful Psychic type. It's got so much power that it can actually break the damage calculation if you boost it enough times. This Psychic attack, I'm sending out Articuno because this is the only way I'm resisting a Psychic. I need a legendary of my own. Just barely hanging on, I use Ice Beam, and he gets frozen. Well, that's kind of disappointing. Now, if you were expecting a great challenge here, you were expecting an epic showdown to capture this guy, yeah, just fish for a freeze. I'm switching off Articuno just to get rid of that low health beeping noise. But seriously, all joking aside, Mewtwo is incredibly powerful and the ultimate prize for beating the game. Well deserved if you made it this far and captured all the other Pokemon. I mean, you don't need to complete the Pokédex to get in here, but still, way worth the trek down here. A fully maxed Mewtwo with Psychic, Blizzard, Recover, and Amnesia basically destroys anything you can think of. There are very, very few ways to actually fight against Mewtwo. There just isn't a consistent strategy for defeating Mewtwo other than using a Mewtwo of your own, so if you play this game in any sort of competitive environment, 99% of the time there will be a gentleman's agreement to not use Mewtwo. Even if it's just you and your sibling when you were kids or something, you probably agreed not to use this guy, which kinda ruins the entire point of owning the most powerful Pokemon in the world. But I digress. So, what are we doing now? Well, if you head back to Celadon City and enter the Celadon Mansion, I mentioned that this is where the developers of Game Freak inserted themselves. They have something special for you if you manage to actually complete the Pokédex. So here we are, the Game Freak Development Room. They don't really give their names, but I could take a guess at who these guys are. The story writer. Well, he seems to like the girls quite a lot. And we can look at their computers, too. Better not look at the ending. I've seen the ending already. Ah, the programmer. I can see you were, slacking off the most. Messing with it could bug out the game. That's funny, considering how many bugs there are in this game. And someone is playing a game instead of working. It's the graphic artist. I didn't know Sugimori was that much of a slacker. I'm just kidding. So by talking to who I presume is Satoshi Tajiri, the head of Game Freak, you get a diploma if you have completed your Pokédex. It doesn't really do anything, but in yellow version you can print it out on your Game Boy printer, assuming you even have one. Alright, so that will finally conclude Pokemon Red/Blue/Yellow/Green. What a journey it has been. I like how Mew's type is Superman in this weird translation of Green version. So I'm just going to run through the final teams of each playthrough and give my thoughts. So for the Green version playthrough, obviously this is not the official Green version at all. It's this really weird ancient translation with a lot of grammar problems and a bunch of bugs in it too. I actually found a softlock that is introduced in this translation. I thought it was appropriate to play this because I wanted to do a heavily glitched playthrough, and I think at the end it kind of got boring because I didn't really have much luck coming up with strategies that would really weird out people. I mean, I think the weirdest thing I ever did was taking a Golbat against Erica, but regardless, glitched playthroughs are always fun to watch at least once in a while, so I hope that was entertaining for some people. So then, with Green out of the way, let's talk about the Yellow playthrough. The Yellow version playthrough was the most interesting to me personally, because I was obviously doing something very different by creating the Ash Challenge. This not only meant using Mankey instead of Nidoran like just about everyone else does, it also meant that most of my Pokemon were not going to be as bulky as the starter normally is for Red and Blue, so that meant that I actually had to think about my battle strategy for each section of the game, and that was actually really nice. Of course, by the end, I was using Haunter and then Gengar quite a lot. I still think that that might have ruined the point of the Ash Challenge, but that was still interesting to me because I was using a Pokemon that I normally would never use because I always skip the Silph Scope. So getting to use the Ghastly line for the first time was pretty cool. This was also the first time that I ever really dived into how much of an improvement Yellow version was, And it was also a very refreshing playthrough in general, so thank you, Yellow version. And then we have the Blue version, which I actually feel kind of bad about because it wasn't that interesting going through the entire game with only 2 Pokemon. And, yeah, I basically played it the same way I play Generation 1 nowadays. Just choose the starter and run everything over with it, which I think, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that most Pokemon games kind of fall into that trap. Unless it's like Yellow version, because they force you to actually get another Pokemon to deal with Brock. And using a patch to add the Japanese Blue game data to the game didn't really do a whole lot either, because I wasn't really using many Pokemon outside of the starter, so I didn't really have any reason to actually do any of the in-game trades, and I think I missed an opportunity there. I really should have maybe tried to take on some of those in-game trades. That would at least give me some additional Pokemon to use. But I guess at least now you guys know the easiest way to play through Generation 1 if you can't really stand the lack of quality of life and just want to crank out a playthrough as quickly as possible. And finally we come to the Red version playthrough, which I don't really think I did as much with it as I could have. I mean, the idea was that I would be capturing all of the Pokemon and completing the Pokédex, so I would have a variety of Pokemon to choose from, and I won't deny I definitely used some Pokemon that I normally would not. I would not have thought of using Oddish before this playthrough. I would not have thought of using Electrode in the main campaign before this playthrough, because with all of the glitches and stuff, it's just way too easy to abuse those and get through the game that way. So, forcing myself to play it the normal way, it definitely got me to learn some things that I didn't know before, but I still feel that there were some missed opportunities, and I don't really know if I would want to complete a Pokédex again, because that was the first time I had ever completed a Pokédex. It was not the easiest task in the world, or the shortest, but I did it. I mean, if I go to Generation 2, then I'm definitely going to transfer all of these guys over so that I don't have to do nearly as much capturing as I did before. Of course, I would have to do a bunch of breeding, but we'll get there when we get there. But, ladies and gentlemen, that will in fact conclude the 4 playthroughs of Generation 1. And I'm sure all of you are asking, when am I going to go to Generation 2? Well, I want to go to Generation 2. I'm hearing that Generation 2 is very underappreciated, so I definitely want to check it out. But probably not right away. This time, I think I want to know a little bit more about Generation 2 before I actually go into it, like plan out the kind of strategies that I'm going to use in the battles, and there's also some other stuff I want to do with my channel, because to be completely honest, this Pokemon playthrough didn't see a lot of views compared to my Advance Wars stuff, and I know people come to my channel for Advance Wars stuff, but every now and again I do like to do something different. But I definitely want to go back to Advance Wars eventually and do some stuff with that, and maybe some other games too. You know me, I'm always doing something maybe a little bit strange, something you're not expecting. I'm always hoping that my videos are entertaining regardless. So whatever happens, whatever I decide to do next, I hope you guys will stick around for that, and you know, leave a comment, subscribe, whatever. I'm still stuck at just under 4,000 subs, believe it or not. I'm actually kind of miffed that I haven't gotten there yet, even though I don't really care about subs. But seriously, 3.96k subs for that long? Seriously? At any rate, this has been the first generation of Pokemon. Someday I will go to Generation 2 and do 3 playthroughs of that, so I hope you'll be there when that happens. I'm Ephraim225. See you later, everybody.